Welcome back, everyone, to another exciting episode of We Heart Therapy. I'm your host, Anabelle Bugatti, and you're watching the series, Your Guide to Therapy and Coaching. Today, we have a special guest who's going to talk to us about grief and loss around miscarriages and losing a child or an infant. We have Norina Murphy. She's an LCSW, and she's going to talk to us about this type of grief today. Thank you, Norina, for being with us today.
Thank you, Anabelle, for having me.
All right. So can you talk to our viewers a little bit about the grief that's associated with miscarriages or infant loss?
Sure. Well, I feel that grief associated with miscarriage and infant loss is really a unique type of grief. I think it's different than other losses. Probably because it goes against kind of nature. When we think about losing somebody, we can conceptualize like losing parents and grandparents. But to think about losing your child, that seems to be something that's really difficult to comprehend and feels like it defies nature. So the grief around it is significant. So I find that people sometimes could really use a therapist to help them process this type of grief.
Yeah, I like how you say that it's a very unique type of loss in that it goes against the laws of nature. Most people could agree, and there's that old time saying that, it goes against nature for a parent to bury a child, and it's basically that same thing. So can you talk to our viewers about how it can be so important for them to come in and find wise counsel during this time of loss?
Yes, I think that it is important to have counseling during this type of loss because it puts people at increased risk. There's, increased risk with PTSD if there happens to have been the loss is something that's very traumatic. There's anxiety, there's depression surrounding it. And so when those types of things happen, then again, processing with a therapist can be beneficial to, again, get through that time. I always say it's not something you get over, but it can help you get through it.
So seeing somebody can really help the clients or anyone who's going through that loss. If it goes untreated, it may run the risk of it escalating into something deeper and more serious or prolonged. So somebody is so important for that reason alone.
Yes.
And it's important for them to know that they really don't have to go through this alone.
Absolutely. They don't. They do not have to go through this alone.
And so what does the course of therapy look like for somebody who's coming in for this type of grief counseling? What types of things would you do in session that might help them heal?
Well, when someone comes in for grief counseling, we do some cognitive behavioral stuff. Of course, we think of different coping mechanisms, ways to, find ways for healthy, for themselves to take care of themselves, to make themselves feel okay in other instances. Are they eating? Are they sleeping? What can we do to assist with those things? And then again, just processing. It's a place for them to feel heard. It's a place where a lot of times people will tell me that they don't ever hear their baby's name said, or maybe people don't bring up their baby because they are afraid of making them feel bad or reminding them of their loss. And, this is a loss that no one needs to remind you. People who have experienced it, they feel it every day. They think of their babies every day. And so, it's something where in therapy, at least they can come, they can talk about it. They can be with a non-biased person. They don't have to worry that the person they're speaking with is going to have their own issues with it. Because sometimes if it is a loss that's perhaps maybe a baby, then their family members may be going through their own grieving process. And so we have to think, or they think of them and they think, well, I don't want to talk about it with them for that reason.
Yeah, so it sounds like sometimes people going through grief don't always know how to talk to others about what's going on, or maybe are afraid that they'd be burdening others if they...
Right, exactly. Yes, they do. So even in their grief, they're still worried about other people.
Yeah, that's so important. So how can somebody find a therapist in their area who specializes in this type of grief?
Well, I was doing a search to see where they could find it. And I know that in Psychology Today, if you go on there and you do filters, you can filter through for people who have training in postpartum depression or who have training with maternal mental health. But there actually isn't a filter for miscarriage and infant loss bereavement. And so I would suggest trying those filters if you wanted to narrow down a search, because a lot of times people, therapists who are trained in maternal mental health and infertility, for instance, do have a lot of sort of looking for. They have experience. There we go. Thank you. Experience with this, because unfortunately sometimes those things can go hand in hand. So you can find somebody that way. You can Google search, and look and see if you find a therapist in your area. My particular training is in something called infant and miscarriage bereavement. So that's something you can type in therapist in your city, looking for that particular type of certification.
So you can also Google somebody who specializes in infant and miscarriage bereavement.
Yes.
Which is what you specialize in.
Yes. Yeah.
And if somebody is interested in working with you, first of all, what state are you in?
I'm in California. I'm in Upland, California.
Upland, California. Good old Southern California.
Yes.
So if somebody is in Southern California and they're interested in working with you, how can they find you?
They can find me at my website, which is Norina Murphy LCSW.com. They can find me on Facebook at Norina Murphy and Associates, and I'm also on Instagram as Murphy LCSW.
Excellent. And we're going to put a link to your website in the description for this video.
Okay.
Thank you again, Norina, for being with us today and talking with us about this very special and unique form of grief and loss for our viewers. And again, always thank you to our viewers for tuning in and watching our special episodes. We hope that what you saw here today was helpful and informational for you. Again, you can look up information for working with Norina Murphy on her website. Check us out at wehearttherapy.com. And if you like what you see here, please subscribe to the channel. More episodes are on the way, so you stay tuned.
Thank you.